to do is I'm going to disconnect. And I'm going to find this area. A little bit closer. So we did look at, megatons and things like that of carbon, but now we can also look at in these areas. As you see through here, we can kind of see if we're looking at those host of crop practices, we can kind of see more what's going on at the local level. You can also type in this region, and then you can do the drop down box, or you can go ahead and you can focus in on this. See within these layers, I mean, basically it's just this this whole layer, not only for looking at grazing lands and range practices up here, but also coming down here and looking at some crop practices. So that's where we'll get into, there's soil textural class, there's a lot of different things at play here, but one thing you may look at is where are your deepest soils. You can see where maybe some of our less deep soils are, here. See, not only in, and in fact, if you remember from that that layer here, you can see this ridge that comes through here. That kind of lines up with a very sensitive area that also lines up. You can kind of see some of that through here. Okay. So maybe in that area, it means that from that, it means that doing like a range planting or a pasture and hayland planting may not be a very good idea. On the other hand, coming back through and doing prescribed grazing, figuring out a way to incorporate into existing grazing plans, some soil health aspects to it, as well as maybe writing some new grazing plans that will probably be more productive, especially in some of those places. Let's look into slope class, which will probably be the most telling. So as you look into some of these areas, so we do have quite a bit of level land in through here. However, once you get into these steeper areas, it'll give you an idea of what you may want to focus on. Let's see, let's go to 5 to 8. See what that pulls up. So once you get above 5 to 8, so the yellow means that there's some components in that, there is some soils within that complex that will have those features, but it's less of the soils within the complex that has those features. And as we keep rising on the slopes, there's less and less soils within that area. So yeah, you're looking at some relatively, especially on those areas, down here, we're looking at doing some cropland practices. We're looking at slopes that aren't too much. So that gives us an idea too when we're looking at these practices. So things like, no-till, for example, and, cover crops, some of those focuses may not be as much on erosion. I mean, of course, we're looking primarily at the soil health, concern, but as a secondary concern, erosion is not going to be as high, and particularly when it comes to water, HEL. You can also, look at some of these other things, irrigation water management, if it's irrigated. We can go ahead and look at that. There's also basically ways of seeing if there's, salinity or sodicity issues. Now we can start to see the electrical conductivity. One of the nice things, even if this screen goes blue, you can go ahead and bring it back. So let's see, we get into here, and we'll get into particularly a little below the surface. Actually, maybe we'll start it on the other way. Maybe we'll start it from strongly saline. Don't have a lot there. Moderately saline. So of course, these are looking at salts other than sodium, or that a lot of the salts are not going to be sodium. And then if you see, okay, you put up the non-saline, now we're going to just get the whole area. Okay, sounds good. Let's go ahead and uncheck all these boxes. This takes just a moment. Now we're going to look at maximum sodium absorption. Just going to shoot for it all. Since I didn't see a whole lot of, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to uncheck this other box. So yeah, we really don't see, salinity or sodicity as being an issue. TSPs are really not looking at some of these other practices that are going to be affected most by, basically, as you can see through here, salinity and sodic soil management are not going to be a priority. Let's just look here. Sometimes planning is over long periods of time. Sometimes planning happens very quickly. So let's open this back up again. And let's go to one of the faster tools to go ahead and get an insight on. It's more fleeting, but nonetheless, it's kind of fast. So if we're looking at this drought dashboard, we've already determined that, basically we may be looking at planting some things, whether it's cover crop or whether it is, say, grass, might be even trees, in some of these practices, like conservation cover can include trees and shrubs as well too. Now we can come into Oklahoma, see how it's. So yeah, you'll see in through here, it's like, well, if we're doing, cover crops like this fall, and your planting may not be that quickly, but you may want to go ahead and postpone that. Whereas when you're coming back up through this area, like a range seeding, it might be, less of a problem with doing like a range seeding or hayland or pastureland seeding. And with that, this is just kind of a strategy of a way you can kind of, figure out, how to use these tools to triangulate down to the practices you'll use. And I'll bring up that little box up through here. So kind of in summary, if I was looking at trying to assist, someone with, these practices and to try to figure out what may be some of the best places to focus our efforts based on these tools, I'd be looking at in that cropland area. It's not real steep. It's relatively level. So maybe looking at, not only adjusting what you put on for cover crops, maybe you'll be looking more at compaction or, getting some good infiltration, and may not be as focused on having as much biomass or other things out there to address, soil erosion. And that maybe include more brassicas, that sort of thing. Looking at your grazing lands, A lot of that is probably going to be too shallow soils in some of those areas. So you may want to focus most on prescribed grazing, and then also put together some maybe some guidance on how you could tweak existing grazing plans, or maybe write new grazing plans. And as well, if you are going to be planning in some of those areas, put together like a little example of the species and species selection, and maybe even get down into on maybe wetter, deeper soils where it'll be more of a success, and it'll make more sense to the planners and the producers and potentially the TSP if one's involved in putting one of these plans together. So with that, this is just a strategy, and I'm curious to see what other strategies people can use these tools to come up with. With that, thank you.